Welcome. I would like to talk about the soul searching experience luxury retreat, the seminar that we are about to hold later this year and the coming year. So there are 4 questions. Pillar 1. Here are 4 question prompts. Oh, 4 question prompts for each. Well, alright. So how does life communicate lessons to us, and how can we become more attuned to recognizing them in daily experiences? So life communicates with us through our intuition. Our intuition is our very own bodily intelligence that knows best what we need, and it gives out a feeling response, different to the mind, which gives you a linear kind of thought-based verbal response that you can hear in the same way as you are hearing your own thoughts in your head, in the same way as you can hear somebody else's voice, like you hear your own inner voice or the voice that you hear, right? When you're thinking, when you're silent, the voice that you can perceive, and then somebody else's voice. And so that is a verbal response. The intuition gives out more of a feeling response and guides us to where we want to be. And so actually that was the second question. Let's go first into the first pillar, a sense of direction in life. Because as people come to the seminar, it is not such a seminar where I'm just going to talk about a whole lot of content, a whole lot of frameworks, a whole lot of content for the seminar. Right? It's not like you're going to be sitting there with your handbook and you're going to write down, and we're going to 5 days where each day in the morning and in the evening we have a certain block of teaching. It's not like that. What it is we will start at about for 30 minutes to 90 minutes. I'm going to give you the overview of these 3 pillars that I'm going to give you right here. And then we go directly into the work. And the work is that I have conversations with people. We start in a small group setting between 5 and 15 people, depending on the type of event and depending on the date. And so we will have conversations, and I will relate the learnings that we have made from this one conversation with a person to everybody else in the room. Because we, as humans, we have a very similar life experience in many ways. In many ways it's different, but in many ways it's also very similar, right? You get up and you have a certain amount of hours until you get to eat for the first time, and then it's the question, what do you eat? And then you probably rest a little bit, and then you talk to some people at some point, and then you eat again, and in between you do something for work, and then, right, you have your systems, you have your computer, you have your tax number, you have a vehicle, you have maybe a house and all kinds of appliances and children, or maybe not. And so these are all systems to be maintained. And that's basically the life experience for everybody of us. We take action. You can only lay in bed for so long, and at some point you will have to take action, right? So action taking is necessary in life, and it's inevitable. We always take the action. So we are moving down this river of life because time goes by whether you want it or not. And the hours pass whether you want them or not. And so the question is, what do you do in between? Right? And that's what defines the direction in our life. So the first pillar of the work that I do with people is, as I see that I'm moving the camera a little bit over to the right. Exactly. All right. So, all right. Oh man. All righty. All right. That's all easy. Well, so the first pillar in all of that. Exactly, that's perfect. Centered. That's exactly the point. What's the center of gravity? What is your path and purpose, the destination where you want to be going? Because whether you're young or whether you're old, a sense of direction in life and your purpose, where you feel this is my mission in life, or you will use less intense and strong words. Maybe you're not quite so sure, but you just want to know where you're moving in life. That's what we're going to be figuring out. That's what I've been doing for the last years and helping people with that. First of all, that's how I got started as a coach, right? Helping people with clarification and with the direction of where they want to go. What do they want to do in their life? And that can be on a macro scale of generally what I want to do. That's probably more for younger people, although older people also sometimes tend to struggle with that and tend to want to have this clarity. And then we go into a process of clarification, of purification, of consolidation, of bringing it all together and finding out what do we actually want to do and what do we need to do in order to get there. Because once the path is clear, once the outcome is clear, what you want, then it's all just a matter of actually taking the action. And here we come to that later because, our action taking is being affected by all kinds of invisible forces of life, such as, are you sleep deprived or are you not? Are you well rested? Are you hungry or are you not? Right? The pull of the planets. Do you harbor a lot of resentment inside of you, or do you live in a state of love? Do you have a lot of guilt or shame? Do you have some painful experiences that The environment that you're living in is constantly triggering, is bringing up there all kinds of, do you seek validation or do you not? And to what extent, if so? These are all kinds of invisible forces that shape people's action taking, where you are dealing with people maybe as an employer and you're like, why are these people like that? Why are they not just like me? Because you tend to want to lead people like you want to lead, and also sometimes like you want to be led, but people sometimes need different ways of being worked with apart from what you want to be doing, right? And so the first part of it, clarifying who we are, what we want in our lives, where do we want to go, and here for some realistic expectation settings. It's oftentimes not quite so simple as to decide, okay, this is my purpose, this is where I'm going, and this is perfectly clear after the seminar. It's unlikely that this is going to happen. Most of the time, what's realistic is that you decide on a course of action, right? Directionally correctness, right? Being directionally right. And then you start stepping and the path appears as you're walking. As you're taking the steps, the path appears. And that is it. And then you just keep going and have the faith that the next step will appear as you keep going. Sometimes you will steer off the path and then you keep going for that. That's why it's very important to actually be talking to people who can consult with you, to have good friends in your life, and also talk to some elders. If we just had them in our society, right? How beautiful would that be if we actually had elderly people who were wise in life instead of fat and silly? Because let's face it, most of the elders, or the elderly I should say, they're not really to be considered elders because they haven't really done very much respectable things in their lives, right? Obviously they had their whole kinds of hardship, I don't want to be judging, but you know, if you watch TV and you just grow more and more bigger and bigger, then why would people be around you? Then you don't need to be wondering why does nobody come and visit, right? How beautiful would it be if we actually had elders with wisdom, who dedicated their lives to, or not dedicated their lives, but who learned the lessons of life, who understood life lessons as they were moving forward with their lives, right? How beautiful would that be? And so, yeah, that's what I'm definitely trying to create. And although I'm not an elder myself, but I've been on this path for like a decade, trying to understand human psychology and the lessons of life. And I can tell you, if you come to the seminar, we can figure this out. So the first pillar of that is sense of direction in life, consolidation, purification, cleaning up your life, leaving out everything that it doesn't belong to you anymore, and bringing in more of the things that are in alignment with the path that you're walking. Okay, second pillar to that is receiving life lessons, exactly what I just said. Life is guiding us, and where to? Life is guiding us towards the life of our dreams, through our intuition. That is how we receive the voice of life, because all of us as children, we had a certain kind of dream or a certain inclination of something that would be very in alignment and in tune with our personality and with how we want to be living our lives, right? Some people dream of an artistic way of living life. Some people dream of leadership and being in control. They dream of power. Some people dream of freedom. Some people dream of connection. Some people dream of status and validation. Some people dream of solitude. Some people dream of a spiritual calling and following that. Some people dream of just being left alone. Some people dream of feeling peace inside. Some people dream of doing something with the earth, and some people dream of going to the moon, and some people dream of racing cars, and some people dream of racing horses, and some people dream of helping people, and some people dream of taking care of the sick, and some people dream of all kinds of different things. Some people dream of science, all different kinds of things that people dream of. And so why would we not create the life of our dreams? Why would we not? Right? Because we receive this voice of life through our intuition that gives us out a feeling response of, what do I really want in my life? What do I want my life to be? How do I want my life to be? And then the path becomes more and more clear as we are stepping. And we are receiving lessons by life. So life, in my opinion, is the best teacher. It gives us the lessons that we need. It burns away all of the confusions and the impurities that we have that are not in alignment with this path, obviously, oftentimes through pain. We learn in two ways through life, through pleasure and through pain. And when we learn through pleasure, usually we don't call it a lesson, we may just call it an epiphany. But if we learn through pain, it's usually a lesson where we're like, okay, now I got it. right? And some of us, we needed to be brought to our knees in pain and be kicked in the face by the boot of life so that we then receive the warmth of love of the all, right? Sometimes we need the pain to get the lesson. But we also don't need to have that much pain. We don't need to create that much pain for us and maneuver ourselves into a situation and only change when we have to. We can change before that. But what's required for that is that we understand correctly the lessons of life that life is giving us. Right? When we maneuver ourselves oftentimes into relationship patterns that are in a certain way, whether they're domineering or whether they're dependent or whether they're insecure or whether they're in and out or whether they are always long distance relationships or whether they are always whatever it might be. Always with a partner who already has children, already with a partner who doesn't love you back, always with a partner who cheats. These types of relationship patterns, they tell us something. When we have certain behaviors that we don't want to do, but they keep happening to us, there's a reason for that. There's a lesson in that. And I promise you, the lesson is not because there's something wrong with you. That's the wrong lesson to draw out of that. But unless we have an accurate understanding of how life works and these mechanics and mechanisms of the laws of life and psychology, right? Then we can't really draw out the lesson. Because we as humans in life, we have figured out what works. You know, there's certain material for a certain purpose that just works. When we say a certain thing to a certain type of person in a certain type of context, it works. You know, when we, as I said, certain types of mathematical equations, we realize that they are true, they just work. We as humans, we figure out what works, right? And so life works in a certain way. And we work in a certain way. And so when we just understand how all of this is working, we can draw the lessons out for us and get an accurate understanding of how we need to adjust our behavior, because this is the underlying part of everything that I'm doing in my work, which is we bring it down to behaviors, because life changes through action and through action alone. But if it were so easy, everybody would just do it, right? And this is nothing new. This is little value to you, me saying to you and telling you that life changes through action. You know that already. That's why it's not of a lot of value, because it's nothing new. It might be of little value because I remind you of that, or a lot of value because the reminder can be powerful. But what's really important and what's really valuable is the actual tactics of how do you do that and how do you change. And here that leads us to the third point of decoding human behavior. You see it on the wall behind me. That's what my work is all about. So as I said, first we find your sense of direction, clarification, purification. What do I do? What don't I do? What do I say no to? Etc., etc. Becoming clear of what's happening and where are we going and what all of this is all about, right? And then second of all, first, as I said, finding the clarity. Second of all, the lessons of life. And then thirdly, behaviors and taking the actions, right? Actions. In that there are behaviors, there are mannerisms, there are habits, there's our environment. All of these are kind of actions. The actions that we take unconsciously and habitually affect us. And then there are also actions that we take in order to get the motivation to take the actions that build the habits that reinforce our environment, that lead us to long-term success and consistency. And here we see how all of that can get a little bit complicated, because we don't only want to take action, we want to take the right action in the right way and also in the right sequence. Because yes, you can call 100 people on the phone, but if you're just dispersing your energy without a right strategy and by being actually very negative inside of you, your voice will reflect that, your behavior will reflect that, and then you won't come up with a better solution. You're just going to hate yourself after that. So it's the right kind of action. Obviously, if you want to do better, you got to take different actions, and probably talking to people involves some of that. So it's the right kind of action, but not in the right kind of way, right? Not aligned with the right kind of strategy. If you're just calling strangers, it's very unlikely. You want to call people who, but all of that takes time. And so the right action in the right way, that's exactly why I'm incorporating 3 other factors to taking the actions, which is positivity, belief, and friends. Positivity because it's the vibration that we give off. People want to be like you when you're positive, because it's not as easy as being negative. Being negative is easy, it's our default. From our mental markup, we tend to prioritize looking for danger, and so that's more impressionable to our minds and to our brains to look for the negative, look for the danger. And so that's exactly why people respect positivity, because they understand that it's not that easy. The default is the negative, so they understand that it has to come from doing something differently and being smart about how we do things and habits and all of that to actually be able to be positive. And so people respect that. Plus people want to be like you and they want to be around you. And whatever you do in life, whether you want to do better, even if you run like an AI-driven company and you don't have any employees, your customers will be people. And so at some point you will have to be with people, and positivity helps with all of that. It helps attract the right kind of friends, the right kind of spouse, but maintaining that is also not quite so easy. And how we do that, we get into that at a later point. Positivity, beliefs obviously, do you believe you deserve it? Do you believe you can do this? Do you believe it can be done? And all of that, like how deeply do you believe in all of that, right? Positivity, belief, then friends. Friends obviously includes the spouse as well, but most people understand that if they are in a secure relationship, they do better. But as I said, a lot of people rather neglect the friend component. They have their spouse, they have their partner, they get their connection from their family, but they don't really have a strong group of friends. And oftentimes people underestimate how many friends and how intense of connection building is actually required in order to get all of this right, because we take a lot of actions. Not just you do one thing consistently and then your life works out. There are lots of actions that you want to take, as I said, in the right sequence, in the right way, with the kind, energy behind that, with positivity and belief and conviction. And it's not that simple. And so good friends are very beneficial to that. And so this is basically the framework that I use for myself. Other schools of personal development, they're teaching the same kind of truth. As I said, life's working in a certain way. We humans are working in a certain way. So like whatever school of teaching is right for you, do that, right? I'm not here to tell you I've got something new, because I don't have anything new. It's just like a way of talking about it that may resonate to some people, because that's related to my own personal experience and the way that I like to language things, right? Obviously, I'm not just talking about my personal experience, but also experience that other people had. I'm not as arrogant to think just because it worked for me, it will work for somebody else as well. That's a mistake that I see a lot of teachers make, and it's not quite like that, because humans are quite different. We are the same in many ways, but we're also very different in many other ways. And so, but these things work. And so for me, that's the framework. Positivity, belief, friends, and actions. Very easy to measure, very easy to remember. How positive am I? Am I believing or am I not, right? And like positivity towards myself, towards others, or is there like inner something boiling and like resentment and all of that? How positive am I? How much do I believe, right? How connected do I feel? When was the last time I connected with my friends? And how is my week looking? Do I have tons of appointments and like meetings and connection with a lot of friends? Or am I just with my family and my kids? And for some people, but very few people, that might be the right thing, but a lot of people are not as strong and positive and believing as they can be, because they lack the friendship connection, right? Because with friends you can talk about very other things than with your spouse and with your kids, and that goes for men and women. I believe it's very healthy as a woman to have other female friends, and yes, also other male friends, and as a man you also want to have male and female friends, like real friends, right, who support you. Why wouldn't you? And the only objection to that is obviously because you're too busy, but that's oftentimes the thing. It's like, I don't have any time to exercise, I'm too busy. Well, yeah, of course. That's the easy excuse. I mean, it's not easy because I know you're working very hard. I'm not trying to offend you in any way. It's like it's a valid excuse. Like anybody would say you are right. But like long term, the people who really have a life of longevity and happiness and health, they still find a way to exercise and to have friends. And that's exactly where the first piece of the consolidation comes in, of like, do you have 3 different businesses with 4 different partners, and you sell for all of them 17 different products in the inventory, and do 5 social media channels for all of them, to 3 different customer personas? You see what I mean? Or is it like one thing that you do well, but then obviously you got to face the fear of saying no to all the other opportunities, right? So 4-step framework, we said this, and then decoding human behavior. Yes, so within human behavior, when we decode that, we are finding out what are the actions that we do want to do that we actually are not doing, and then why, and then what actions are we doing that we actually don't want to do, and then why is that? Because oftentimes as we're changing behavior, we're looking at the behavior. I'll give you an example. So let's say a man or 2 men and 2 women drink at night and overeat, right? It can be man or woman. And so why is that? And so when we want to change that, oftentimes we look at the behavior, we look at the drinking, we look at the overeating, but we don't look at the cause of it. And in my view, and in my experience in working with people, in order to really make the change and make the change last, you need to look at the cause of that behavior. Because the identical behavior that looks identically can have two different causes. And so then you need to go about that in a very different way. I'll give you an example. So let's say this overeating example, all right? Let's say it's a man for this purpose, although the drinking is usually more towards the man. Women tend to lean towards the overeating just as a tendency, although it can be for any individual either one of those, right? It's just tendencies of how we tend to deal with it, because men tend to usually bottle up a lot of anger inside of them, and so do women. But for a lot of women, it's usually, the connection with food that feels good in a certain way. And a lot of men, you've probably had this in your family as well, a few generations back, alcoholism among men is a huge problem, right? Is it not? And so when we're thinking about the overeating, two men can overeat for two very different reasons. One person because he's working so hard throughout the entire day that he needs that in order to wind down. He doesn't give himself any opportunity to wind down and relax in a real way and in a healthy way. And so this is just basically his body needing some rest. It's a very different experience when after you've drank or overeaten, you go into a state of sadness and of guilt and of defeat, where you feel, oh man, that has happened again. I just thought it would never happen again. It's just been, I've gone without it for like 13 days. But it has happened again. It just continues to happen. I'm just so powerless. And like within these feelings of feeling disempowered and feeling defeated, other deeper feelings of sadness are coming up that are usually shut off. And so here's what happens. If there is some kind of challenging situation, or you may call it trauma inside of you, that is connected to the sadness, and you don't want to feel this because the memories around that and everything that it would mean to you, how you would adjust your life and live differently if you were to look at that and were to confront that, would be challenging to deal with, would be too much mental load. You feel you can't deal with that currently as you have so much on your plate already. And so you choose to avoid it, you choose to not deal with it. And by the way, I'm not judging. I've done this a lot of times for many years until I was forced to confront these things, right? Because I was always feeling too exhausted with everything else already, but what was actually making me exhausted was not dealing with shit. Because I learned this in my family as well. We just had stuff laying around the house all the time, everywhere, in every kind of corner, because apparently my parents were too busy to deal with it, right? So I learned this. And they probably were. But like that's the manifestation of this kind of avoiding things, right? You just don't deal with things, you just avoid them. And so when this is what you do, then there might be a deeper feeling of sadness inside of you that you haven't dealt with. And so whenever something on the surface triggers you some sadness, you avoid these feelings on the surface level sadness just the same. But you also push down the deeper feelings that want to come out, so they just amplify because they want to be felt. And why? Because they want to leave you. Once you feel them, they leave you. Once you really allow yourself to feel the sadness and process the memories and all of that, it gets out of your body, but it doesn't get out by you shutting it away and shunning it. It comes out by you confronting it. And that also doesn't mean indulging it, but it means confronting it and feeling it through and dealing with it, giving it a new meaning. But first of all, feeling what's really there, not being afraid to feel the real, authentic feelings for it. And you may also say, well, I'm too busy to that. I can't just sit around and sob for 45 minutes. Well, on the other hand, it's been fucking with you for a decade. So maybe you want to take 45 minutes to sob and to really let it out, right? It's always, we think we don't have the time for that. And it's usually an excuse of, I'm afraid to actually do that, right? Because also the way that you don't have time for things is because you're avoiding things, right? And so you see that when you then overeat, you go into these states of defeat afterwards, and your mind is linking overeating with this sense of defeat. So like whenever it's getting too much, you feel compelled and you overeat and you've done it again and your barrier breaks down. And then you feel these states of defeat and of sadness. And if that's the only way you feel that, then when this emotional need, for letting go of these feelings rises, you manifest the behavior that has been linked in your mind of if this, then that. Like if I overeat, then I feel the defeat and then the sadness can finally come out. It's a very different reason. Like in the first example where I said the person overworks because of, and then we also want to go into the deeper reasons of that, is that for validation, is that because out of I want to be a provider and a protector so much because otherwise then I'm not worth anything, because that's related to love. It's kind of has been the prerequisite of I need to behave in a certain way in order to get shown the love and affection that I craved as a child, right? Especially when the love was scarce. Then we develop all kinds of behavior patterns of like, no, I need to always provide, I cannot rest, I must always be vigilant because something can always happen. When these are the patterns that lead to overworking, and that can be, as I said, working in order to wanting to provide or working in order to distract from, the vigilance, for the anxiety and all of that, then you just eat in order to like calm down your nervous system. It's a very different approach of working with this type of person, as if it's the second example of the person actually being, needing to process the sadness. And I hope you've seen that, and it's been 26 minutes, and so I wish you a good day.